Hello everybody, hope you're doing well. So this week we actually start off in the same way that we started last week with Brûlé and Oven making their way, not to Whole Cake Island anymore, they're making their way to Whole Cake Chateau. And we see that the castle is still collapsed. It hasn't been repaired or brought back up. And if you follow the road that Oven and Brûlé are on, you find some little tiny silhouettes moving in the distance, which I'm assuming belong to Big Mom's children, so we'll get to see more of them pretty soon. Also, some quick news, there were some casting announcements made throughout the week for the One Piece live-action Netflix TV show, specifically for the characters of Kobe, Elvita, Helmeppo, Buggy, Arlong, and Garp. And so I know that the Reddit thread for this announcement had to be locked because it got a little bit too heated, the discussion got too heated, it got too tense. But as for me, my stance on the show has remained unchanged. I said this before, I wish all of the actors the best. You know, I wish them good luck on this new project, on this new job that they're going to undertake. At the same time, as somebody who focuses primarily on the source material, which is the manga, I obviously do have my questions and I have my doubts. And ultimately, those doubts and questions won't be answered until we actually get to watch the show. So until then, we just don't know. That's been my stance, you know, and I think it's been consistent throughout. Also, apparently this week's One Piece anime episode had to be rescheduled because somebody hacked into the Toei servers. So anyway, the actual chapter starts off with Bloodthirsty Drunk Mode Kaido. I think other translations called it like Homicidal Kaido or something like that. And you can see why, right? Like this is a vicious, vicious attack that completely decimates Luffy. The impact of this is tremendous. Luffy's bleeding all over the place and he just loses the air from his gear fourth and he just flies away. Well, he kind of flies away, but then he ends up in the same spot ultimately. And then Momonosuke says that he can't hear Luffy's voice anymore, that it's gone, which was not the case the last time that Luffy got KO'd, right? Because the last time Luffy got knocked out, Kaido dropped him out of Onigashima, Luffy fell into the water, and he was still able to communicate with Momonosuke using his voice. Like, he even told Momonosuke to give everybody a message that he would come back to fight Kaido. And this is not the case anymore. That voice is gone. Or at least the chapter makes it seem as if Luffy's voice had to be extinguished for him to be reborn. To the point where we even get the victory box, the Alabasta victory box for Kaido. And so it makes it seem as if Luffy lost the actual fight, and that it's going to be up to Nika / Joy Boy to finish it. I like how the CP0 guy is like, no regrets over what he did. He's like, he's accepted his crime. He's like, yep, I know I've sinned, my fate is sealed. Bring it on. And so we get this massive Conqueror's Hockey Blast that breaks the ceiling, you know, makes it crumble. And the final CP0 guy is pretty quiet throughout all of this. It kind of makes me suspect that there's something going on. Like, he doesn't say anything, he's just very silent. It actually gets me to think that perhaps he could be a secret ally in hiding, that maybe he wanted Luffy's awakening to be triggered, and so that's why he sent the other guy to interfere with the fight. Then we have Kawamatsu stressing how dangerous the flames are, and how there's a lack of water up there. And so I'm reading that bit of dialogue, and I'm like, well, gee, if only you had a giant elephant that could use its trunk to spray some water onto the island to put out the fire. That would be great. But then on top of the burning and the collapsing ceiling, you have Kaido show up with his beam, just shooting people around the floor with it, and he's asking for Momonosuke's surrender. He wants him to give up. But if there are still people that are willing to fight him, he's willing to take them on and defeat them as well. And I love this. This is such a great low point for the series. It's just awesome. The tension that we've been craving is here. You got some funny looking gifters in that panel with Kaido. One of them is like a crocodile or an alligator with like women's hair, and then the other one is like a frog with giant hands. I love the fact that we have characters that have been pushed to their limit already, and they're still deciding, okay, like, what do we do now? I also think it's interesting that Law says that he can't hear Luffy's voice anymore, that Luffy's voice has vanished. Because I remember when Luffy fell into the water, and the Heart Pirates found him, I remember the Heart Pirates also saying, like, you know, we can hear him, like, we can hear his voice, but how is he speaking while he's underwater? We don't know. So it's curious that Momonosuke, Law, and the Heart Pirates are able to hear, or were able to hear Luffy's voice before. And also the fact that the Heart Pirates were able to hear Luffy underwater, to me that pretty much implies that this Sun God Nika ability that Luffy has bypasses the water weakness that Devil Fruit users have. So given the fact that he can communicate telepathically while he's underwater, I mean, we could extrapolate that and say, well, maybe Sun God Nika isn't weak to water like the rest of the Devil Fruit users. I love the fact that Nami kind of breaks a little bit, and she actually steps out of like that sort of like safe zone with Margo and Tama, and she starts calling Kaido out, telling him that he's lying, that Luffy's not dead. And the thing here is that Nami's moments in this arc seem to echo a lot of Usopp's moments back in Alabasta. First, it's her declaration of like the fact that Luffy's going to be king of the pirates, which Usopp did back then. But then also her words in this chapter seem to echo Usopp's firm belief that Luffy is not dead, despite the fact that he's being told otherwise. And I do think it's important that she's literally the only Straw Hat that we see in this chapter that actually stands up to what Kaido is saying. Because if you look at Chopper, right, Chopper's like, oh no, Luffy's dead, right? So, you know, because Chopper's like the youngest one of the crew, so it makes sense that, you know, he's full of doubt sometimes. But I think with Nami, the fact that she's actually, you know, standing up, and again, just deciding to leave that safe space and putting herself at risk, I think even Kaido kind of like, you know, acknowledges her. He says, well, at least one of you has some moxie. Moxie means determination, nerve, right? So Kaido acknowledges that in Nami. I think that's huge. I think that's important. And, you know, I know that One Piece is not a love story. Oda has specifically said that he doesn't write it, you know, for romance, and that he doesn't really want to write romance in the story. That's not what this story is about. But if I were to look at it through some romantic lens, or, you know, just kind of like, you know, reading a little bit maybe too much into it, ultimately, I do get the feeling that Oda is showing that Nami's feelings for Luffy are maturing, or that they have matured. Because the intention behind what she's saying, right, in this moment and in the moment that she has against Ulti, when she says that, you know, she believes that he's going to be king of the pirates. So those are two moments, right, with sort of like the same intention. And the intention is that she's pretty much expressing her commitment to Luffy. So Kaido shoots a beam at her to shut her up, and then Marco steps in with the Protect, which, again, I love the fact that Oda's using these characters, right? It seems like, you know, there's still some fight left in Marco. Same thing with Kid. I like how Oda made use of Kid's will, which kind of relates to him having Conqueror's Haki, right? Where he says, like, I'm not giving up. I'm going to continue fighting and see this through the end. And then Kaido has a very tyrannical speech about how everybody in Wano is essentially his slave. All he cares about is what people can produce, right? Whether they're useful to him or not. And so it's interesting that Kaido is talking about slavery, because it brings me back to Jinbei versus Who's Who, where Who's Who pretty much tells Jinbei that apparently there was a figure in the long distant past that slaves would pray to. He was a legendary warrior, and slaves believed that one day he would free them. They thought he would bring smiles to their faces and deliver them from suffering. So it's definitely not a coincidence that we have Kaido talking about enslaving people in the same chapter where Nika begins to make his return. Now Kaido actually sounds like he's full of resentment here, so I'm just going to read you what he says. You dared to fight back against me, and you have earned my wrath. This is what it means to lose a war. The cost of your defeat is your freedom and your hope. And I'm curious about the line where he says, this is what it means to lose a war. Because it's like, so is this what happened to him after God's Valley? Because his boss, Rox, he lost a war. He lost the War of God's Valley. Maybe afterwards, maybe Kaido was, you know, taken prisoner. We do know that he was being held in Punk Hazard, and that he's been captured in the past. So it just seems to me like he's taking this very personally. So I kind of suspect that maybe he's connecting this experience to what happened to him in the past. Bring me Momonosuke. This is how this ends, according to Kaido, right? Just bring me the kid, and that'll be that. And then some beast pirate fodder charge up towards Law and Kid, who are still pretty exhausted, but then their crews step in to try and defend them. And I like the fact that the guy that belongs to Kid's crew is protecting Law, and then John Bart is actually protecting Kid. So it's kind of like they switched, you know, protecting different captains, but there's some teamwork there. Now, before that happens, there's actually a line from one of the Beast Pirates who says, to Law and Kid, he says, you might have beaten Big Mom, but Kaido was always the ultimate adversary. Which I think is interesting, because I think Oda, like, initially, before the raid, portrayed Kaido and Big Mom as being equal, you know, but then, like, as the story went on, you got that statement from Killer about Kaido being the strongest pirate, and then you got Big Mom, you know, constantly getting clowned on, and then you have this guy in this chapter saying that Kaido is the ultimate adversary. So what do you guys think? I know they're both Yonko, right? They're technically both Yonko level, but has your opinion changed in regards to how you would rank Big Mom against Kaido? Then we get Nekomamushi and Carrot rushing towards the live floor, And this is shaping up to be like a just everybody versus Kaido match. I hope we get a scene where everybody jumps Kaido all at once and everybody's trying to take him down, or at least trying to land a hit on him using their special attacks. We shift outside to a conversation between Yamato and Momonosuke, and Momonosuke has lost all confidence in himself. He's just questioning like, okay, what else is there to do at this point, really? And I remember at one point, Luffy specifically told Momonosuke to bite Kaido to get his confidence up. Because after Momo bit Kaido, Luffy told him like, see, you already bit a Yonko, you already bit Kaido. There's nothing you can't do. But apparently, you know, Luffy gets knocked out and that confidence is erased. I like how Yamato is pulling on Momonosuke's whiskers, while at the same time offering him some words of encouragement and hope. For a moment, I thought that Yamato was sort of like, you know, prepping Momonosuke to go back into the castle and fight Kaido. And Yamato's pretty strong, so I feel like if they were to go back inside to fight Kaido, I think there's a lot of stuff that everybody can do together, including Yamato, to stall Kaido further. However, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen because Sunisha talks to Momonosuke by the end to offer him some tangible hope. But ultimately, I think a lot of Yamato's belief in Momonosuke comes down to what was written in Oden's journal about Momonosuke being a crucial part in terms of bringing forth the dawn. And so Yamato says that all of the daimyo that essentially let Orochi get away with whatever he wanted ended up going to their graves full of regret, you know, just full of guilt and shame. Unlike Shimotsuki Yoshimaru and his group of daimyo that were imprisoned with Yamato, who actually died in the battlefield proudly fighting for their beliefs. Kind of reminds me of a bit of dialogue that Ace has that could be related to the Will of D about how it's very important that you live a life of no regrets. And so sometimes in life, when you're thinking about making a decision or you're not sure, like, you know, should I do this? Should I not do this? Sometimes it's best to think about, okay, what will I regret more? Not doing this or actually doing it? Actually, I just want to clarify something really quick because there's two translations to Yamato's dialogue. And the official translation, the English, says, "This is what the daimyo from all over Wano did when they gave their lives fighting back against Orochi." So this bit of dialogue actually makes it seem as if the daimyo actually pushed back and died honorably. And not just a few of them, but all of them. And so that kind of ties it into a little bit of dialogue from Ashura Doji that we've seen in the past. So I'm pretty sure that the official English in this case is the most accurate one. And so Yamato goes on to say that instead of giving up, I'd rather we die together. And so that'll be the name of the next anime opening. Instead of fight together, it'll be die together. It'll be incredibly cheerful. Because Kaido just won't stop. We get a shot of him just blasting everything on the life floor. Things are getting pretty intense downstairs. And all of a sudden, we go back to the top. And we see that Luffy is actually frowning. I find that interesting. You know, it's one of the few occasions where I've seen Luffy actually lose his smile. But obviously, he doesn't lose it for very long. Because then he gets possessed by the spirit of the Gomu Gomu no Mi. Or, you know, by Nika / Joy Boy's reincarnation. And that gives him back his smile. Now, according to what Sunisha says, it has to be Joy Boy, because the sound of the drums of liberation is unmistakable. Now, I want to use this as an opportunity to talk about some of the lyrics of Bing Sake, because I feel like this chapter makes that song incredibly relevant. So I'm going to be using the English dub version for this, you know, just for clarity's sake. And so the first part of the song that really sticks out to me is the one that says, "O'er across the ocean's tide, rays of sunshine far and wide. The birds they sing of cheerful things in circles passing by." Now, if we were to translate it literally, the Japanese version would sound something like, "The birds sing as they draw circles in the sky." So we have the word sunshine there, which I think could kind of connect to sun god Nika. But most importantly, like the birds drawing circles. You have these birds making these spirals in the sky. And I'm like, okay, could the birds be like another way of saying Lunarians? Because Lunarians have wings. And I've already kind of mentioned how it's possible that maybe Lunarians could have invented devil fruits, that maybe they created them. So could the spirals, could the circles that the birds are drawing in the sky actually be them creating devil fruits? Another part of the song that I think is pretty important is the one that says, "Gather up all of the crew, it's time to ship out Binks's brew. Pirates, we eternally are challenging the sea." So it's kind of saying that pirates are destined to challenge the sea. And so a question is, okay, so who is the sea? Well, what's interesting is that Imu, the name Imu, if you flip it, if you read it backwards, it spells Umi. And Umi means sea in Japanese. Then there's another verse that says, "Somewhere in the endless sky, stormy winds are blowing by." So there's a threat coming, right? And then it says, "Waves are dancing, evening comes, it's time to sound the drums," which is what Sunisha says in this chapter. "But steady men and never fear, tomorrow's skies are always clear. So pound your feet and clap your hands till sunny days return." So it's like a promise, right? That things are going to get pretty bad for a while, but then eventually the sun god Nika, will return. Then there's another another line in the song that says, "Beneath the moon we'll meet again." So of course this entire raid has been happening under the light of the full moon. And then the last part of the song says, "After all is said and done, you'll end up a skeleton, so spread your tail from dawn till dusk upon these foamy seas." So the word tail, right? Spread your tail, which is what Joy Boy, Nika, left behind. A story, a tale full of laughs. So in other words, write your story while you're still alive. Write it from dawn till dusk. Write it throughout the day. So just the whole song really makes me want to know what Nika and Bink's friendship was like in the past. And so Joy Boy's return pretty much represents the light coming back, right? The light that was extinguished 800 years ago, you know, after the Void Century. Because remember, the Gorosei asked Imu, which light would you like us to extinguish this time around? Which one would you like us to erase? Long time ago, the command was made to extinguish Joy Boy's light, but now he has returned. It's kind of funny how you see like Luffy's hair sort of melting into something else. It kind of looks like wax, but it also looks like honey. Obviously, this whole thing has generated a lot of discussion throughout the community, primarily focused around the concepts of free will versus destiny. I've been reading people comparing this chapter to Naruto and how a lot of people were disappointed by the end because Sasuke and Naruto ended up being reincarnations. Well, and it's also about how far in advance did Oda actually plan this? That's another very, very big point of discussion here. Now, out of those 2 points, the one that I'm more interested in is the second point. Because the first point, the whole thing about whether it's destiny or free will, right? Whether it's predetermined or it's coincidence. Like to me, I've always reconciled those two by like going back to Forrest Gump and that quote that he has in the movie where he says, "I don't know if each of us has a destiny or if we're just like feathers floating around in the breeze." I think that maybe it's a little bit of both, that maybe both are kind of happening at the same time. So they're intertwined and maybe, you know, maybe there is such a thing as fate, but fate only gets you so far. And then eventually you have to act. But then again, you can say, well, if I didn't act on that opportunity, then maybe I was never meant to act on that opportunity in the first place. So it gets really philosophical, but I do think that maybe, like my perspective is that, yeah, maybe it could be that there's a little bit of both. And then there are actual quotes in this story that pretty much support the notion that it's also a combination in this story of One Piece as well. There's Luffy that stands for freedom. There's Nika who like wants to free slaves, right? So it's all about you choose how you want to live your life. Luffy doesn't force you to see things his way. He just tells you, you decide. However you want to see this, you decide. That's your freedom. So he respects that. But at the same time, we have like this whole thing about destiny and how Roger and Rayleigh were destined to meet. At one point, Rayleigh even says, so maybe things like maybe everything in this world does happen for a reason. So it becomes like this mixture of both and it becomes debatable. And at one point, I remember Kaido in this arc, when he was fighting Yamato, I think at one point, he tells Yamato, in this world, there's no such thing as like, you know, easy answers, right? Or clear-cut answers. We want things to be either black or white when reality is gray. You know, there's a lot of nuances. So I think the story is kind of inviting us to sort of go in that direction. But a lot of people, you know, I think we find it confusing. We don't like it. We want an answer. And speaking of that scene with Yamato and Kaido, I remember Kaido also like telling Yamato, you ate this fruit, right? Your devil fruit that you ate, that's like for the protector of Wano. And he's like, what a waste that it happened to be you who ate it. And then Yamato says, I just ate it because I was hungry. I didn't want to be destined to anything. I just ate it because it was there and I was starving, which is very similar to like Luffy eating the Gomu Gomu no Mi. And so the question is, was the Gomu Gomu no Mi always supposed to be this special fruit? Because I remember when they were little, Ace would yell at Luffy telling him like, your fruit sucks. Rubber is just not good for fighting. All you can do is bounce back attacks and sink like a rock into the ocean. And so that's kind of what made Luffy cool in a way, that he took this random fruit, this random rubber fruit, and it actually took a lot of creativity and hard work and training for him to actually come up with a way to use it so that it worked for him, to make it useful for him to fight. Now it turns out that the fruit was actually more special than that it was actually kind of like, sort of like this pathway for a very famous figure of history to be reincarnated. And so again, the question I have is, was this actually planned in advance? Because I remember, you know, back in Marineford, Luffy is going out there trying to save his brother, spamming all types of Gomu Gomu no Mi attacks, And nobody says anything about his fruit being special or having the potential of being special if awakened. You have Sengoku there, you have Garp, you know, they both know about the history of the Rock's pirates. You have the admirals. All of the Marines are in some way, shape, or form affiliated with the world government. And nobody mentions anything about Luffy's fruit being special at all. And then at one point, there was an interview, or I think an official source, where Oda said that he didn't know how Luffy was actually going to defeat Kaido yet, because he knew that the audience was not going to be satisfied if Luffy just punched Kaido into a KO, that there needed to be something else, aside from punching, aside from hockey. And I'm willing to bet that maybe he started having these thoughts around the time where he introduced Katakuri into the story, because Katakuri was sort of revealed to be a special paramecia. So maybe that kind of allowed him to expand a little bit more on what to do with Luffy's devil fruit. And we already knew that Joy Boy was going to make his return, because during the Oden flashback, that's what Oden says, that we have to open up these borders, you know, for Joy Boy's return. We want to be able to have a welcoming Wano for Joy Boy. So Joy Boy was always going to come back. But the real question is, was he always going to come back this way, with Luffy's Gomu Gomu no Mi being revealed to be more special than we originally thought it was? That's the biggest question. Was the Gomu Gomu no Mi being special planned from the start? Because obviously we know that, you know, Luffy being the protagonist, the main character of a shonen, all these main characters are meant to be special. They're meant to do something that is special. The question is, was he always meant to do something that was special because of the devil fruit that he ate? And so again, I think it goes back to maybe it's a little bit of both. Maybe some things were planned ahead of time and maybe some things weren't. Maybe Oda had a feeling of where he was going with this from very early on, but he didn't have the specifics in place yet. So again, maybe it's a combination of making things up as you go along and allowing yourself to be free, while at the same time having that sort of inner compass, that inner voice and whisper that kind of nudges you along the way so that you can get to where you're meant to be. So with that in mind, I can't wait to see what happens next. I can't wait to see what Joy Boy / Nika looks like. Kind of gets me to think about Roger's last words to Rayleigh about how he's not going to die because these things kind of get passed down. And so we'll see what happens. I definitely think that we're going to get more closure and more clarity as the chapters go on. I think it's going to become pretty obvious very soon as to whether this was something that Oda had always planned or if this was something that he kind of just decided to do, you know, kind of near the beginning of the post-time skip era. I think ultimately we'll all get to a point where we'll know. We'll just know whether this was something that was crafted a long time ago or whether this was something that kind of like popped up sporadically. And so for now, I think that all we can do is just wait for more information to see how the dots connect. So yeah, let's see what happens and let's see what we find out. I'm gonna be taking a trip next week. It's a trip that I've been wanting to take even before the pandemic. I was actually planning on doing it before the pandemic, but then, you know, I couldn't, and now I actually have the space and the time to do it. So wish me luck. Thank you for all of your support. It really does mean a lot to me. Take care, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.